On 5 News, justice for a murdered woman as her killer is finally found guilty. A police blunder allowed Christopher Halliwell to escape justice 5 years ago. Becky Godden's family say it's been a long and painful wait to see her murderer convicted.
Today, we've received the justice that has felt like an eternity coming for our beautiful little girl, Becky.
Also tonight, armed and dangerous US police on terror alert arrest the main suspect in the New York and New Jersey attacks. Former footballer Paul Gascoigne pleads guilty to making a racist comment at his one-man show. And he ain't heavy. Alistair Brownlee gives his struggling brother a helping hand at the World Triathlon. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. A taxi driver who killed 2 women but was only jailed for 1 attack has this afternoon been found guilty of the second murder. Christopher Halliwell was already serving time for the death of Sian O'Callaghan, and it was during that investigation that he took police to the body of Becky Godden, who he strangled in 2003. In a tearful statement outside court, Becky's mother said, "Justice has felt like an eternity coming." Julian Drucker reports.
If I get charged with this and I'm found guilty.
Christopher Halliwell being interviewed last year by police over the murder of a young woman which he denied. Remarkably, he appears to offer them a deal to solve the case.
I can resolve the matter, but I don't want you coming back every couple of years. If it goes to court and I'm found guilty, that's it. They lock me up and throw me away the key.
Halliwell had already been locked up in 2012 for a previous killing. Now he is a convicted double murderer.
We have waited over 5 years for this momentous day. It has been an extremely painful journey, but today we've received the justice that has felt like an eternity coming for our beautiful little girl, Becky.
In March 2011, Sian O'Callaghan went missing after a night out with friends. Days later, Christopher Halliwell was arrested at a supermarket in Swindon, initially on suspicion of kidnap. After just an hour, he agreed to take police to Sian's body at a field in Oxfordshire. An hour later, Halliwell asked Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher if he wants another one. He was referring to another body and took them to a field at Eastleach in Gloucestershire and remains he'd buried previously. Police named the woman as Becky Godden, who had been missing for 8 years. The next year, Halliwell admitted murdering Sian O'Callaghan and was sentenced to at least 25 years in prison.
Sian's suffering led to ending Christopher Halliwell's freedom, making him unable to kill again. The complexities surrounding the cases will continue, but there will never be closure as long as Sian is no longer here.
Steve Fulcher, who was leading the case, broke arrest guidelines when Halliwell was detained by refusing his requests for a solicitor and failing to caution him properly. He has since left Wiltshire Police. Today in a statement he said, "I caught a serial killer, preventing any further girls being murdered. My actions are deemed by the police service to be acts of gross misconduct. When the extraordinary facts of this case are explained, it is likely to lead to a public crisis of confidence in the competence and credibility of the police service." Christopher Halliwell today laughed and smiled when the jury returned their verdict. The killer, who lived with such dark secrets for such a long time, faces the possibility of a whole life term in prison.
Julian, this has been a long and difficult investigation. Finally over, though.
Sian, what is unusual and worrying about this case is the length of time Christopher Halliwell waited between killing his victims. Now, Becky Godden died at some point between 2003 and 2005. Sian O'Callaghan went missing in 2011. That is potentially an 8-year gap. What was Halliwell doing in those intervening years? Well, a significant new development tonight. Superintendent Sean Memory from Wiltshire Police told me he can't rule out that there are other victims. Clearly, they'll be going back and looking at any missing people from those times, particularly young women, to see if anything can be reinvestigated. As for the man at the centre of this, Christopher Halliwell, he defended himself in the dock. He was often rambling, often going back over his own evidence and not really making that much sense. On Friday, he'll find out how much more time he'll spend in prison, if not for the rest of his life.
Julian, thank you. In the last hour, authorities investigating the bombing that injured 29 people in New York have arrested a suspect. He'd been wanted over a number of other suspicious devices that were discovered afterwards. One blew up while bomb squad officers were trying to defuse it. Charlotte Grant reports.
As if people here didn't already feel on edge. This happens. A device explodes in New Jersey just as a robot had been trying to deactivate it, taking nearby bomb squad officers by surprise.
That was not a controlled explosion. That occurred when they were cutting it in order to make it safe.
Found near a train station in New Jersey, there were as many as 5 potential bombs hidden inside a backpack. After a weekend of attacks with multiple devices in New Jersey and New York, the FBI have one suspect. In the last hour, it's been confirmed 28-year-old Ahmed Khan Rahami has been taken into custody, an American citizen originally from Afghanistan. Their manhunt led the FBI to this area of Elizabeth in New Jersey, searching a flat above a fried chicken shop. While no one was hurt by the devices in New Jersey, the explosion in New York on Saturday blew out the windows of nearby buildings, injuring 29 people and 1 seriously. The bomb used here was similar to a device found a few blocks away. Pressure cookers filled with shrapnel, similar to the ones used in the Boston Marathon attack. But Minnesota was also targeted this weekend. 8 people were stabbed in a shopping centre. So-called Islamic State said it was behind the attack, and in the last hour it's been confirmed what happened here is being treated separately to the bomb blasts in New York and New Jersey.
Our counterterrorism and law enforcement professionals at every level, federal, state, and local, are working together around the clock to prevent attacks and to keep us safe.
President Obama is one of the many world leaders descending upon New York for a United Nations conference. Against this backdrop, more than 1,000 extra police officers are out on the streets of New York. But the focus is 20 miles away in New Jersey, the FBI searching what's thought to be the suspect's house. The man they wanted to speak to may be in custody, but for now there are more questions than answers. Charlotte Grant, 5 News.
At a UN summit in New York, the Prime Minister Theresa May is to criticise the West's approach to the migrant crisis, saying refugees who are fleeing unsafe countries are too often confused with people who want asylum for economic reasons. Today, campaigners outside Parliament in London laid out 2,500 life jackets worn by people crossing the Mediterranean into Turkey to show the risks so many are taking. Double Olympic champion Mo Farah has had his medical details leaked by hackers. He's one of 8 British gold medalists who've been targeted today, and that's after the release of files belonging to Sir Bradley Wiggins and Chris Froome last week. Let's catch up with Catherine Jones, who's with me. No claim that any of these athletes have broken any rules. So what's been leaked today?
Well, the hackers have released what's called the therapeutic use exemptions, or TUEs, of these athletes. Now, this means they have been allowed to take a banned substance for a verified medical need. In Mo Farah's case, there is actually a discrepancy with what he said in the past, because he said he'd had 1 TUE in 2014 in his career, but his records reveal he was also allowed to take a steroid in 2008. Among the others whose records have been released today, there's rower Helen Glover and also the British cyclist Callum Skinner. He's a victim of this hack. The UK anti-doping agency says all British athletes get their TUEs through a robust and independent process. And really the focus isn't on those individual athletes, because, as you say, they have done nothing wrong under the current rules, but it's a focus on the World Anti-Doping Body, who has to now explain and make sure that all of these exemptions are being properly used. Kathy, thank you. Former England footballer Paul Gascoigne has pleaded guilty to making a racist comment during a stage show in Wolverhampton last November. The court heard that Gascoigne humiliated his security guard in front of an audience of 1,000 people. The judge said it was not acceptable to laugh it off as a joke.
Layla Hayes reports.
Posing for selfies and signing autographs, Paul Gascoigne arrived at Dudley Magistrates Court this morning, making his way through the waiting cameras. The former England footballer was due to stand trial, but instead pleaded guilty to a racially aggravated offence after the court heard he humiliated a security guard at one of his shows. It was here at Wolverhampton Civic Hall during an Evening with Gaza show last November that Paul Gascoigne admits making the racist comment. The black security guard was standing in a dimly lit area of the stage when in front of 1,000 people, Gaza said, "Can you smile so I can see you?" The judge told Paul Gascoigne, "You sought to get a laugh from the audience because of the colour of his skin. It is this kind of insidious racism that needs to be challenged. I accept that you grew up in a different time, but we live in the 21st century. Grow up with it or keep your mouth closed." The judge told the former England star, who's had a long battle with alcoholism, that in spite of what happened, he wasn't racist. He said it was a stain on his character. How'd you feel, Gaza? Paul Gascoigne must now pay a £1,000 fine and £1,000 in compensation after being told his comments were unacceptable. Layla Hayes, 5 News, Dudley.
Still to come on the programme. Life after the Paralympics. We look at whether the Games really help make life easier for disabled people. And the Brownlees show us all that brotherly love is actually more important than winning. All that and more after the break. Welcome back. You're watching 5 News. They are up Brexit Creek without a paddle, canoe or even a map. That's how former Liberal Democrat leader Nick Clegg described the government today as the party began its annual conference in Brighton. The man who took over his job, Tim Farah, told us people would want a second referendum so they don't end up with the deal they didn't vote for. So will that help the Lib Dem fight back? Our political editor, Andy Bell, finds out.
You don't have to be at their conference to see the Liberal Democrats are not the force they were. But could a cause save them? Remember him? He believes the party must focus on the government's current lack of any Brexit plan.
That is what will lead to gridlock in the next few years under this hopeless government. That is why they find themselves up this Brexit creek. I mean, never mind, they don't have a paddle, they don't have a canoe, they don't have a map. They have absolutely no clue whatsoever.
Still, only last year they were in government. So in times like these, how do the faithful keep the faith?
I think if there's a general election tomorrow, we'll probably end up with double or triple the number of MPs we've got now.
Why do you think that?
Because everyone else is messed up.
I haven't gone down beat anyway, because I've been around for a long time. I've seen us go down and I've seen us come back up again.
It's not looking too good, is it?
Yeah, but there's only one way to go from here, isn't there?
Is that what it feels like?
Well, upwards, obviously.
Tim Farah is the man who must lead them. And on Europe, he told me the country must be given another referendum on the terms of Brexit.
The British people are going to have some deal enforced upon them that they didn't vote for, and that is a recipe for mass loss of trust in politics, even worse than we have now.
But just to be clear, if people vote against the deal that's presented them by this government, you as the Liberal Democrats would take that as a signal to say we are staying in the EU.
Well, it's not a case of anybody taking it as a signal. It seems perfectly plausible to me and the right thing. That
but then you're disregarding the vote that happened earlier this year.
You're just asking the British people to have their say. My case would be that the referendum on the deal would have as the other option on the ballot paper staying in the European Union. That seems entirely sensible.
To revive their fortunes, the Liberal Democrats are looking for something. Could Europe be what turns the tide for them? Andy Bell, 5 News, with the Liberal Democrats in Brighton.
The Ministry of Defence has confirmed that British forces took part in airstrikes on Saturday that killed dozens of Syrian troops fighting so-called Islamic State. The Ministry of Defence says the UK would not intentionally target Syrian military. The stand-in chairman of the troubled Southern NHS Trust has resigned. The Trust said Tim Smart had stood aside for personal reasons. It's been strongly criticised over its handling of the deaths of patients in its care. After 11 days of incredible sport and inspirational stories, the Paralympic Games are over for another 4 years. A packed stadium in Rio watched last night's closing ceremony, which featured singers, dancers and a spectacular fireworks display. And this is how it all finished in the medal table. What a story for Great Britain, second place with 64 golds and a total of 147 medals, smashing their target. So once again, our athletes have done us proud, continuing to change perceptions. But back home, what difference does that make for those who live with disability day to day? We asked journalist Mick Scarlett for his views for our special report.
I've been using a wheelchair since I was 16, but more than 3 decades on, it's still a struggle to get around. No way I'm getting in there. Ah, OK, I'm not going to fit through there. Right, I suppose I better cross the road. Using a tube station is often impossible, and a bus only has room for one wheelchair user at a time. We hear a lot about the term Paralympic Legacy, and for many disabled people there has actually been a real legacy. People are getting involved in sport, people are doing more, being more active. But for many of us, there is this gap between legacy and what we really experience. The world around us is not being made as accessible as we want. Into a lot of the restaurants, many of the shops I can't get in, and even those that I can get in, I might not be able to go to the toilet. And that's what it feels like to be disabled. But changes to the way disabled people's care packages are funded by the government pose devastating results. Sophie currently has 24-hour-a-day care, but because of the cuts, she could lose her funding and her independence.
You know, we're not asking for anything special, we're just asking for the same opportunities as everybody else, i.e. to get out of bed in the morning when we want, to go to the loo when we want. The only other people that have those things dictated to are prisoners who have been, you know, found guilty of some crime. Well, what crime have I, as a disabled person who needs care, committed?
What does the words Paralympic Legacy mean to you?
Well, not very much, Mick, really. I mean, it's kind of a non-event, isn't it? It feels like, you know, every 4 years we get dragged out of our boxes and it's all hey, and, you know, all of a sudden you've got disabled people in adverts and it's all lovely. And then we all go back in again. And it's like nobody wants to hear us, and that's it. You know, you've had your 5 minutes in the sun. You know, you get back in your place now, so to speak.
Right side. Here at Aspire, a leisure centre for disabled and non-disabled people, these guys feel the Paralympics has left a positive impact on them.
I think there's a lot of inspiration that comes from the Paralympics. I mean, I've only been injured for a year, so I'm new.
You're a newbie.
I'm new to the game, and the inspiration it's given me, as in, like, my main ambition in this sport is to become a Paralympian.
Younger people who are disabled, they've got something to see and aim for, whereas before they might have thought, what am I going to do?
So maybe that's it. To achieve a real legacy, we have to work as hard at equality as our Paralympians have worked at winning gold. Mick Scarlett, 5 News.
Well, one of the lasting memories of the Olympic Games was the gold and silver won by the Brownlee Brothers. But last night's finish to the World Triathlon Series in Mexico was perhaps even more special. Johnny was leading, but the heat and exhaustion got the better of him. He staggered to the side of the road and all seemed lost, but then up stepped his big brother Alistair. Minnie Stevenson has the story.
For a moment, Johnny Brownlee's dream of winning a second triathlon world title was in sight. But just a few hundred metres from the finish line, dazed and disorientated from dehydration, his body had had enough. And then, forget sibling rivalry, along came a sibling to the rescue. From one brother to another, as the crowd cheered, the pair ran side by side until Alistair almost carried Johnny the final steps before pushing him across the line ahead of himself into second place.
To be honest, it's an awful position to be in. If he'd conked out okay from the finish line there and there isn't the medical support, you know, it's a dangerous position to be in. So whatever, obviously the World Series is a big play, but whatever, it's the right thing to do.
Alistair knows only too well how it feels to be helped over the finishing line. In the 2010 World Championships in London, after suffering from exhaustion, medics had to carry him to the end. And his brother very much appreciates it. After being treated at a hospital in Mexico, Johnny tweeted from his bed, "Not how I wanted to end the season, but gave it everything. Thanks, Ali. Your loyalty is incredible."
You know, you can never write them off. It doesn't seem to matter what happens. They will rise to the occasion and just go above and beyond what you think anyone is capable of. Everything that you could possibly put together in a sporting soap opera happened in the last 30 seconds of that race.
But Alistair, who won gold just ahead of Johnny at the Rio Olympics, says it was a natural human reaction and he would have done the same for anyone. Nevertheless, as the world watched two brothers in arms, they proved their bond means more than winning. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
Oh, remarkable. Now, before we go, Matt's here to tell us what's coming up on 5 News tonight. And you're doing a little bit more of that, aren't you?
We are indeed, although Alistair told off his brother for not just taking it easy in the past few miles. But we'll have more on those extraordinary Brownlee brothers. I'll be speaking to their former coach who discovered their talents when they were just young boys. We'll also have more on that terror alert in New York and New Jersey after several bombs were discovered over the weekend. These pictures are just coming into us now of police arresting their main suspect. We'll have the latest developments and we'll talk to a terror expert about whether we're seeing a new spate of so-called lone wolf attacks, Sean.
Look forward to that. Thanks, Matt. That is it, though, for now. Sean Welby has the weather next. I'll see you again tomorrow at 5. Matt, of course, back at 6:30. Thanks for watching tonight. Bye for now.